What would you do if the very person who ripped your world apart showed up years later, eyes full of regret, whispering your name, and begging for help? Not for forgiveness. Not for a second chance. But for survival. They weren't just a part of your story, they hijacked the whole script. They knew your secrets, your dreams, and your fears. They took your trust, turned it into a weapon, and then vanished, leaving behind nothing but silence, shattered pieces, and the kind of pain that lingers even when you're smiling. Let me take you back to that moment. The day everything fell apart. The air was heavy, and not because of the weather. Something felt off, a strange quietness in the room where laughter once echoed. I still remember the faint scent of their perfume mixed with the cold metal of betrayal that hung in the air like smoke from a fire I didn't start. My bank account, drained. My apartment, empty. My name, dragged through mud by someone I called family. People think betrayal is just heartbreak. But betrayal is so much more. It's identity theft of the soul. You look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself. You walk down familiar streets, but everything feels foreign. You become a ghost in your own life, haunted by memories that once made you feel alive. They didn't leave a note. They didn't say goodbye. One day, we were planning our future. The next day, I was standing in the middle of a wrecked life, wondering if any of it had been real. Friends asked what happened. Some didn't even need to. They assumed. You know how it is, when you're down, people don't need reasons. They just need rumors. I rebuilt myself, but not like before. Not with laughter, not with trust. I built myself from quiet strength and lonely mornings. I stitched my heart together with discipline and prayers. No one held my hand. No one came running. I was alone until one day, years later, I heard a knock. It was soft, hesitant, almost fearful, like the wind had carried it accidentally to my door. I didn't recognize the silhouette at first. But the eyes, oh, those eyes. Eyes I once memorized. Eyes that once smiled at me while stabbing me in the back. And then came the words. Please, I need your help. I stood frozen. I wasn't the same person anymore. My skin had thickened. My heart had scars where hope used to live. But in that moment, everything came rushing back. The betrayal, the pain, the nights I cried into silence, the mornings I questioned my worth. Why now? Why me? Why after everything? That's what the story is about. Not just about the betrayal.
Not just about the theft.
But about what comes after. About the choices we face when fate throws the past back at our feet and asks, so, what are you going to do now? Because sometimes, life doesn't just hand you closure. It hands you the person who broke you, now broken themselves, and says, your move. Before the betrayal, before the empty apartment and the echoing silence, there was a time of laughter, trust, and warmth. My name is Zion. And like many, I had someone in my life I never doubted, not even for a second. Her name was Misha. She wasn't just my childhood friend. She was my confidant, my business partner, my chosen family. We met when we were 12, in the rain, sharing an umbrella between two strangers who quickly became inseparable. From school notebooks to late-night dreams, everything was shared. Where I lacked boldness, she carried fire. Where she lacked stability, I became her anchor. I always thought God had sent her to balance me out. We started small. A local boutique, fueled by handmade crafts, digital marketing, and a vision bigger than our city. We worked tirelessly. She handled the charm, client interactions, branding, and PR. I worked behind the scenes, accounting, inventory, online platforms. It worked perfectly, or so I thought. What I didn't realize was how blind loyalty can be when your heart is invested too deeply. Misha was charismatic. She could talk anyone into anything. She had that rare ability to walk into a room and make everyone feel like they mattered. But behind that smile was a darkness I never saw. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. I had my flaws too. I was too trusting, too idealistic. I believed if I gave my all, people would return it in kind. That's not weakness. That's being human. My parents passed away when I was in my early 20s, leaving me with a modest inheritance and no one else to call home. Misha became that home. She promised we'd build something lasting, a future that honored everything we lost. And I believed her. With everything I had. We made our first major profit after our third year. Things were finally clicking: brand collaborations, client lists, online traction. That's when Misha suggested we split the company legally, 50/50ths. It made sense. She had worked just as hard, and I trusted her. I signed the papers without reading the fine print. Looking back, that was my first mistake. She had her share of secrets, and I had my share of doubts. But love, even platonic love, can silence all inner alarms. I ignored the late nights, the whispered phone calls, the sudden expensive habits. I told myself, she deserves this. We both do. Until one morning, I arrived at the office and found the doors locked, the company account emptied, and all digital assets transferred. Everything was gone, including Misha. She left a single message: "Don't come looking for me. You'll be fine." And just like that, a decade-long friendship ended in a single text message. The days that followed were a blur: police reports, frozen accounts, legal notices. She'd taken my name, my money, and worse, my credibility. Clients pulled out, vendors refused to work with me, and rumors spread like wildfire. People whispered that I was part of the fraud, that I let her run away, that I was weak. But what hurt more than anything else was the silence from her end. No explanation, no remorse, just absence. I moved to a smaller apartment, started freelancing to survive, and kept my head down. I didn't talk about her. I didn't even say her name. But in my heart, a question screamed endlessly: why? In time, I stopped asking. I let go, not because I forgave her, but because I couldn't carry her shadow with me forever. And yet, even in her absence, she shaped me. I became more careful, sharper, colder, perhaps. But I also became stronger. I rebuilt what I could, brick by brick. I made peace with the fact that closure would never come. Until the knock. Until that cold winter morning when I opened the door and saw her, a shadow of the woman I once knew. Fragile, hollow, desperate. And suddenly, all that I buried threatened to rise. She wasn't supposed to come back. She wasn't supposed to need me. But she did. And this time, I wasn't the same person she once knew. The knock at the door that morning sounded like any other. But when I opened it, time folded in on itself. There she stood, Misha. The girl who once made my life brighter and later turned it into a smoldering wreck. Except now, she wasn't dressed in designer brands or flashing that confident, untouchable smile. She looked shattered. Her eyes, once fiery and proud, were tired. Her skin pale. Her clothes wrinkled. She looked like someone who had wandered for miles with nowhere left to go. "Zion," she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind was caught between rage, disbelief, and something more dangerous: pity. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, swallowing back what looked like shame. There it was. The first hint of vulnerability in a person who once walked away with my trust in her pocket and my name in the mud. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head. Slam the door. Demand answers. Call the police. But none of them left my lips. Instead, I stepped aside. She walked in quietly, eyes scanning the small apartment, the faded cushions, the humble surroundings that screamed of a life reduced. "You've changed," she said softly. "I had to," I replied. She nodded. For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Then, she sat, folding her arms tightly around herself as though trying to keep from falling apart. "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness," she started, voice trembling. "But I do need your help." I raised my brows. Of all the things she could have said, that was the last I expected. She went on to explain. After she disappeared, she partnered with a man, an investor, who promised her the world. Together, they expanded the business idea, using what she had taken from me. For a while, it worked. They grew fast, too fast. But then things went dark. The man she trusted ended up doing to her what she had done to me. Only worse. He not only siphoned money, but tied her into legal contracts that made her liable for debts she didn't even know existed. Her accounts were frozen, assets seized. She was left with nothing. Poetic justice? Maybe. But even so, hearing it from her lips didn't bring me satisfaction. Why me? I finally asked, staring directly into her eyes. Why come to the one person you destroyed? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry. Not yet. Because no one else will believe me. No one else remembers who I used to be. You were the only one who ever really saw me, she whispered. The irony stung. I had seen her, trusted her, believed in her. And she used that belief like a blade. I asked the questions that haunted me for years. Why did you do it, Misha? You could have told me anything. Asked me for more. Taken your share. But you didn't just leave. You destroyed me. Her voice broke. I was scared, Zion. I wanted more, faster. I felt like you were holding us back. I listened to people I shouldn't have. And then when I saw how easy it was to take it all, I convinced myself you'd be fine. You were always the strong one. That wasn't an answer. That was a justification wrapped in weakness. I was never the strong one, I said sharply. I was just the one left behind. She looked down, and for a moment, I saw the girl I once knew, buried deep under regret and poor choices. But her being sorry didn't erase what happened. The world I knew was torn apart, not by an enemy, but by a friend. And now, years later, she was asking for help. I'm not asking you to trust me, she said, eyes pleading. Just help me prove what he did. Help me fight back. I don't have anyone else. You had someone once, I replied coldly. And you chose greed over loyalty. That should have ended it. But something inside me twisted. A part of me, the part that still remembered how we built dreams out of nothing, stirred. Helping her wasn't about kindness. It was about closure. About facing the storm I ran from for years. Still, I didn't say yes. Instead, I started asking questions. Who was this man? What did he do? What proof did she have? I wasn't going to be a pawn again. We spent hours talking. Every sentence she spoke was laced with remorse. Every explanation measured. Maybe it was genuine. Maybe it was performance. But every now and then, I saw flickers of the old Misha, the one who stayed up late brainstorming logos, who laughed at my bad jokes, who once cried when we made our first real sale. She hadn't changed completely, but pain had humbled her. The conflict inside me grew. This was my chance to turn away, to watch her suffer and call it justice. But was revenge ever going to heal me? That night, I barely slept. Memories flooded me. Our shared childhood, the rise and fall of the business, the humiliation, the loneliness. But one memory haunted me most, the day I realized she was gone, and I was alone. I woke up the next morning with a decision. I'll help, I told her, but not because I trust you. I'll help because I want to see the truth, all of it, and I want you to face where you ran from. She didn't thank me. She just nodded, eyes red with tears she refused to shed. We began digging. She handed over the documents she managed to collect, bank statements, emails, audio recordings. Together, we pieced together the story she had lived, now mirrored against mine. And it wasn't long before I saw the pattern. The manipulation, the deceit, the promises made and broken. Her new partner had learned from the best, perhaps from her. And now, she was tasting her own medicine. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about redemption. For both of us. Each day we worked together stirred a mix of resentment and recognition. I found myself snapping at her, then softening when I saw her pain. She walked like a ghost, haunted, cautious, waiting for me to lash out. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because the truth is, no matter how deep the betrayal, the past doesn't disappear. It lingers. And sometimes, facing it is the only way forward. We decided to confront the man who ruined her, to bring everything to light. But even that wasn't simple. There were threats, denials, manipulations. We were walking on the edge of fire. But something inside me had awakened. a fire I thought Misha had extinguished long ago. I was no longer the broken boy she left behind. I was a man who had lost everything and still survived. And this time, I wasn't fighting for her. I was fighting for myself. For the truth. For the closure that had evaded me for far too long. The truth, like a deep wound, had been festering for years. But now, we were nearing the moment when it would be exposed, raw and unfiltered. Misha and I had spent weeks gathering evidence, connecting the dots, speaking to people who had once been part of her world. Every new revelation brought us closer to the storm, and yet, neither of us was prepared for the full force of it. The day of the confrontation arrived, and I stood outside the building, feeling the tension in the air. Misha was beside me, her face pale, her hands trembling. The man who had stolen everything from both of us was inside, and we were about to take everything back. "You sure you want to do this?" I asked, though the question felt pointless. Her gaze met mine, and for the first time since I had opened the door to her, I saw someone who wasn't broken. Someone who was ready to fight. "It's the only way I can make it right," she whispered. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of secrets, the kind that had been buried for far too long. We walked into his office like we had done 1,000 times before, except now the air felt different. The once confident and charming man, the one who had convinced Misha to betray me, now seemed small. He was behind his desk, a smug smile on his face, as though he thought nothing could touch him. "Misha," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I didn't expect to see you here. I assume you've come to beg for forgiveness." She didn't flinch.
No.
"I've come to expose you." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. He looked at her, his smirk faltering. "Expose me?" he scoffed. "You don't have the guts. You never did." But Misha wasn't backing down. She stepped forward, handed him the documents we had collected, the contracts, the bank statements, the emails, everything. His face went pale. You can't prove this," he said, his voice losing the confidence it once held. But there was fear now, an underlying panic that wasn't there before. "Don't underestimate me," she replied, her voice steady. "You're not the only one who knows how to play the game." I watched the scene unfold, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about Misha anymore. It was about something larger, about the years of lies, the stolen future, the manipulation, the broken trust. Every piece of evidence we had gathered was a blow to the man who had tried to destroy our lives. He tried to stand, but his chair scraped the floor with a noise that sent a chill through the room. He was no longer in control. The man who had once ruled with intimidation was now on the defensive, scrambling for an escape. "You think this is over?" he sneered. "You think you can bring me down with this? I'm untouchable." "Not anymore," I said, stepping into the room. "You're not untouchable. And I'm not the one you betrayed." The room went silent. The air was thick with tension. Misha's eyes locked with mine, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. We had been on opposite sides once, but now we were allies. And that felt strange. It felt like a win. The man before us, the one who had played everyone like pawns, had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. The evidence was irrefutable, the witnesses lined up, the truth too powerful to ignore. He tried to reason, to beg, but the weight of his guilt crushed him. His empire, built on lies and deceit, was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "What will happen to me?" he asked, his voice hollow. "It's already happening," Misha said quietly. "You'll face the consequences of what you've done." And in that moment, I understood something profound, something I had missed for years. Revenge wasn't about making someone suffer as they had made you suffer. It was about breaking free from the chains they had placed on you, about reclaiming your life and your power. The man was led away that afternoon, his future uncertain, his empire dismantled, his reputation ruined. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. As the dust settled, life didn't return to normal. It couldn't. The scars were still there, but they weren't as sharp as they had been. Misha and I parted ways after that day. She had her own journey to make now. We both did. Our paths had crossed again for a reason, but they would not intertwine forever. We had faced the truth together, but we had also outgrown each other. I think we both knew that. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild. Not just my business, but my life. The pieces of who I was before, the person who trusted, who loved, who gave, began to take shape once more. I wasn't the broken man I had been. I wasn't the angry, vengeful ghost who roamed the streets, looking for closure. I was someone who had found it, not in the punishment of others, but in the restoration of my own spirit. Misha, on the other hand, had to face her own demons. She reached out to me once, after everything was over. A message, simply saying, "I'm sorry. I'll never be who I was before, but I hope one day you can forgive me." I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for me. I had already let go. I didn't need to look back. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. Some scars remain, no matter how many years pass. But in the end, it's not about what happened to us. It's about how we choose to move forward. We can choose to live in the past, to dwell on the pain and the betrayals. Or we can choose to rise from it, to let go, and to reclaim what's ours. What will you choose? Will you let your past define you? Or will you rise above it and create your own future?